Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Start Small, Think Big podcast brought to you by Digital Meld. My name is Brad Grew, co-founder and CEO of Digital Meld.
And I'm Robert Grew, co-founder and CTO at Digital Meld.
All right. I'm John Ohlwiler, CEO of Sentry Technology Solutions.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, John, for joining us. John has a storied background. I can't wait to talk about what they're doing at Sentry Technologies and hear more about what their clients are doing and then the folks they're working, the projects they're working on from an AI and automation perspective, and just getting that, consulting philosophy. And the beauty of the consultants, they can also, like ourselves, you can offer a lot of different perspectives because you see a lot of different customers. And I think there's a lot of different things we can talk about. Our goal for this is to empower mid-market businesses to unlock the real-world potential of AI and automation, which I think John and his team definitely help with as well. So we there's a lot of synergies between what we do, and I think it's really important to get perspectives from folks that are like us, but just have different experiences. So thanks for joining, John. And why don't you just take a couple minutes to introduce yourself to the podcast and let people know about your background and what kind of led you here.
Yeah. Oh, great. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm John Ohlwiler from Sentry Technology Solutions. We're based in Orlando, Florida, but we service multiple states. We have some larger clients that are across multiple states. And we started as a general IT firm back in 2014. But over time, we developed this technology maturity model, and it kind of grew from what we call operational IT, which is, can you turn it on? Can you turn it off again? What do I do when I can't get my email? The basic, what you would think of IT support, stuff like that, basic infrastructure, stuff of that nature. Then security and compliancy. I don't think it's any wonder why security and compliancy is important in this day and age. And then from there, we get into the fun stuff that we all like talking about and that you are part of too, where we call it business integrations, which business integrations is more than just system integrations between software sets or system integrations from an IT perspective. It's also integrations on is your company having cross-departmental conversations, including technology? Is your company, do you actually have structured processes that technology could follow? And how is your technology woven into your processes? And then from there, we can go into the innovation level, which the innovation level traditionally was digital transformation. Now, everybody just calls it AI and automation. I mean, that's really what it is. But how do you once you get your base and you get it secure, how do you take your processes and structure and everything and then put it into something that can 10x, whether that's back 3 or 4 years ago, or, back further, it was programming and using custom modules in Salesforce or tying APIs together, stuff like that. Now it's more workflow automation and some of the agentic stuff that's happening. That's kind of where that innovation layer, sits. It's a little bit about us. I've been in technology for basically forever. I was doing websites in high school. My dad was a COBOL programmer. My brother is a storage area network manager. So we have fun Thanksgiving dinners, But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. No, this is going to be good. I also started out doing websites, and Brad and I, our first business we started was a hosting company way back. I guess it was 15 years ago now, 20 years ago. It was a long time. And that's what, got me really interested in the infrastructure pieces of things. It got me some good gigs at the very start of my career. So yeah, really looking forward to this discussion. And I think, like Brad said, there's a lot of synergies here with us. And it's good to get different perspectives from different folks and working with all kinds of industry. Just curious, John, what typical client base do you work with, like size, industry, things like that, just so it'll help me kind of.
Yeah. So we're fairly industry agnostic. I do have a medical IT background. I was an internal CIO for a medical company for 7 to 8 years or so. And they went through buying out multiple companies and sold off a big portion of their company to another company and everything. So yeah, a lot of history in the medical IT space. But as a company, we service all different walks of life. Really, our sweet spot's more in the size range. We feel that a lot of, especially in the innovation and integration layers that we talked about with that technology maturity model. You have smaller companies that are your, $1 to $2 million and under, that are just operational in cybersecurity, and that's all they can really care about or anything. And they're still trying to figure their life out. But once you hit that lower middle market, what some people call second stage company of, say, maybe the 2 million to 5 million up to 100 million or more, somewhere in there. And then, a lot of people ask about employee counts. It really depends on how distributed that company is, stuff like that. Like a manufacturing firm that has 500 employees, but they're all in the same big building. And that's the only place where their infrastructure is and stuff. It's a little bit different of a company than I have 500 employees, but I have, 100 locations with 5 employees each or whatever, something like that. So looking at that, sometimes that upper level gets in the $250 million a year, but that's your kind of the sweet spot of what that second stage market is. And those guys, there's a lot of AI consultants out there that are like, oh, I'm an ex-Google person and I'm, doing consulting for the Fortune 1000. And they're consultants and they help strategy for people like Coca-Cola or Disney or whatever. And I've met quite a few of them, and they're smart, but they don't want to hire a team. They want to actually do the work. They'll sit with the higher, bigger companies and help, do some ideas of case studies and stuff, bring in different vendors or help that company promote some people internally, move some things around internally, hire externally to like do the work, right? And these smaller firms, they want to do this AI stuff, but they just can't visualize it the same way. They don't have the same structures as those larger companies. They don't have the same SOPs and things of that nature. Like, let's take something like Walmart, for example. Walmart has, I don't know how many locations they have in the US. Each one has a general manager. The way that general manager is managed, the SOPs they follow, the KPIs they're expected to meet, all that other stuff is all standardized. So when Walmart wants to make a systematic change that's including AI or not including AI, but in our case, that's including AI, it's easier for them to do that. And it's easier for them to get everybody to fall in line. These smaller companies where it's like, oh, we have 1 or 2 managers and we really don't have any structure. We just kind of let them do what they do. It's harder for them to make those types of changes in their processes, in that business process. So it's a whole different world. And a lot of those companies don't have the IT staff or technical staff or expertise to try and do some of these AI projects on their own and even infrastructure projects, whatever that may be. And that's where I think there's a sweet spot in the market that you've grown up to where you need more than IT management and basic cybersecurity, but you aren't to that Fortune 1000 or that next rung tier down or the Fortune 1000 where you can take advantage of some of these AI consultants and things like that. And that sweet spot of the market is where the most businesses are in America. That's where the most growth could happen in America. That's kind of where most employees are in America, are in that sweet spot of that second stage middle market type company.
Listeners are probably thinking, wow, there's a lot of synergy between what you guys do because you're saying a lot of the same things they've heard us say over the last 30 episodes plus at this point. Your processes are king. If you don't have those documented, that's the first place you should start. That's where we start with almost everybody. And then we figure out where the technology can make your life easier within those processes. We use a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, is what we say, and figure out the best places to do that. And we also focus on mid-market companies. So we say anything $1 billion and below, anything under 1,000 employees below. Obviously, you have a better time when you're right in the middle there, like you said, 250 million to 500 million. People that it's a growing company, so you're going to grow with them, but they don't have a 20-person IT team, right? They don't have this technology. They maybe not have a CTO or CIO. They may only have a COO, that kind of thing. And so we love working with those companies. For one, it's easy to get stuff done because the decision maker is a door knock away. You can literally walk 2 doors down and knock on the CEO's door. You don't have to go 12 different layers and 12 different teams to get someone who actually can make a decision. That's one reason we truly love it. We think they could be more nimble. But like you're 100% right. There's the smaller organizations that you can focus on things like CMMC and cybersecurity and basically you become their MSP, handle their licensing, that kind of stuff. We do that to get our foot in the door with the hopes of growing along with them and help them, teach them about processes and procedures and 100%. It's impossible to scale if you don't have those processes. And we see that every single day.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Especially in the middle market, it's where it's messy. Some people have more mature processes than others, or some areas of the company may have more mature processes than others. Where, the smaller companies, they don't really have any process. The larger companies, it's also locked in stone, red tape, bureaucratic. It's way harder to change things. And you're right, that sweet spot, you can walk a door or two down and actually talk to the stakeholder and help make some decisions right there on the spot versus the bureaucratic craziness of some of the larger organizations. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny too, you're talking about the consultants from Google and I've, interfaced with some of those folks and the thing that I've noticed is, and Brad and I talk about this all the time when we're, we think through potential AI ideas daily, I would say, like most people. And all the solutions that the folks out in Silicon Valley are building typically don't like really relate to the industry that they're actually building it for. So a lot of companies, as an example, oil and gas is huge. We're in Houston. There's a ton of AI SaaS products out there now, and they're marketed towards oil and gas firms, but you can tell by looking at the product, by how it works, it's not like they didn't actually do any market research. It's a good idea. It's not a bad idea. It's just in theory, when you put this thing out on site, you're not factoring in that you're not going to have an internet connection, that you're not going to have on-prem compute out there in West Texas in the middle of nowhere. And so to take it back to my original comment about the consultants, like I've seen these consultants from Google go to these companies, but then they don't actually see the real picture, the big picture of all the bureaucracy like you're talking about, the red tape, the change management of all of this stuff. To me is like something people talk about, but I mean, I'll be honest, half the time when we're working with folks or companies, it's like making sure people understand how all this is working. Let's align on goals. Let's make sure we're all trying to accomplish the same thing here. Like I feel like, at least for me, I'm doing more change management than the technology sometimes, which is fun, but it's just an interesting thing I've noticed over the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. I tell a lot of smaller companies, you have to be able to visualize what you're actually wanting to do. What I mean by that is there's that story. I don't know if you've ever read the book Power of Habit. It's like 12, 15 years old now, New York Times bestseller. I quote that a lot because there's a chapter in there about Target and how Target back then, again, probably 15 years ago, I'd have to look at the published data again and stuff, could predict how pregnant a woman was based on interactions with Target within 2 weeks of her due date. Okay, if Target was doing that then, what do you think Target's doing now? Do you think they've scaled up or scaled down their investments in that type of technology, right? And while to the layman, they don't understand all the differences, like technically that was machine learning versus LLMs, whatever, but let's just face it, it's AI, right? And today's lingo for most businesses, they don't need to understand the differences of all the difference between RPA and LLMs and machine learning and algorithm thinking and so on. They don't need to understand all that. But they do need to understand that these larger businesses have been investing in it for way longer than they have, and they have way more history at it than they have. If you think about what Target was doing 15 years ago versus whatever the heck they're doing now that you don't know about, and you're a retail store that's a smaller middle market retail store, how are you competing with that? How are you meeting that business need? And the problem is a lot of these consultants that come out of like Microsoft or Google and stuff, they're used to that big bureaucracy. They're used to that large company. And I'll give you an example like Disney. Disney is here in our back door. We're in Orlando, Florida. They have a data center here. They have tons and tons and tons of IT staff here that is doing everything from hosting ESPN to all sorts of logistics to running the parks to the financial accounting for all that, everything, right? They have a huge IT department. You get so segmented where like you hire a networking guy from Disney and they don't just have a networking guy. They have a separate wireless team. They have a separate switching team. They have a separate firewall team. They have separate other types of WAN teams, stuff like that. And so it's possible for you to be working in Disney and all you're doing is switching and routing on switches, but not actually touching the Wi-Fi network and not actually touching the firewall. And you don't know how to operate without other people doing that. And so these consultants come out of like somewhere with Microsoft and they have all this different support and all these different people that are kind of doing the job as a team, where when you get scaled down, you don't have the same team. Most companies I'm talking about, you're lucky if they have a networking guy, let alone a firewall guy or a firewall team that's separate from the switching team, that's separate from the Wi-Fi and radio team and stuff, right? So I feel that there's a lot of situational awareness and knowledge that's lost at the bigger levels because other people are doing it and you don't have to worry about it. Where when you scale down to like your West Texas scenario, you're the only guy and you've got to figure it out. You don't have 2 or 3 other people that are looking at other things from other angles. It's really just you, right? And I think that's why a lot of these larger consultants either get frustrated in the middle market or they can't seem to make things work in the middle market compared to the larger markets, just because they don't understand what they've lost by not having to worry about all these other things that they've been part of different groups of teams that have been worrying about that on their behalf, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. And that resonates with both me and Robert because we both have enterprise experience. It's funny you mentioned Target and consultants like coming from Google and stuff. I worked at Microsoft for 5 years as a PFE, and I've been to Target, I've been to Coca-Cola, I've been to MasterCard, I've been to Wendy's and Walmart. I've seen how all of these massive companies run. And exactly like you said, whenever I needed to get something changed as a PFE on site, there would be 20 different people on the call. I need from 20 different teams, like just to get a simple network change. We've gone through merger and acquisitions where these small companies that we work with are acquired, and we're sitting on calls with 25 different people. And if one person had the access to do everything, the call could be 10 minutes long. And we've actually elbowed our way and say, we'll be the bad guys. We're just going to make the change and you can live with it. That kind of thing. So we think that the mid-market, these tools are going to make them far more successful, and they have the ability to grow far faster because they can adapt far quicker, because you have the decision maker. You can have the decision makers all in one call and get stuff done. And so that's amazing insights. And so again, a lot of synergy is what we kind of talked about. But I want to challenge you both now, because John, you have a medical background, and Robert does too. He worked for the Houston Methodist here in Houston, and so I know you guys both love Epic. It's the greatest software ever created. Just kidding. And so what could a small, I don't know, like a small medical facility or a small group of doctors who have like 4 or 5 practices together, what's like a pragmatic and practical approach that they could take? Maybe they don't use Epic, maybe they use one of the smaller solutions kind of thing to help upskill and bring on solutions and change for them from a medical perspective.
I think there's a lot of concern around, HIPAA and private data, and depending on if you're using public LLMs, private LLMs, some of that stuff, and how do you sort that still? I mean, there's definitely some ways around it. Some of the bigger hospital groups and stuff have, started hosting their own LLM in Azure or something like that, right? And that's a different story. I think where you see probably the most advantage is things like the ancillary type things like medical billing, or maybe logistics of making sure you have enough gauze and needles and things like that. Some of those things, some of that automation that you could happen there, or some type of decision making that doesn't necessarily deal with the patient data as much. I think there's some areas there that you could take advantage of. Now, with that said, though, is a lot of that you're reliant on those other software sets. So like medical is very entrenched in their EMRs. And if the EMR doesn't want to play ball and they don't have open APIs, they don't have a way to transmit the data or for you to interact the data programmatically and stuff, that's going to cause some challenges. I've seen the legal space, switching a little bit out of medical, I've seen the legal space be more open to it, where a lot of their medical, or I'm not medical, sorry, a lot of the legal software is starting to come out more to be able to work with APIs or MCP servers and stuff like that. I don't know how medical is going to do it, because almost every compliancy officer is a hard no on most things. And it's hard to get around that. And while there are ways around that, the problem is the compliancy officers and the security officers aren't sticking their head up enough above the forest for the trees type thing to see, okay, this could be done in a positive way, or this could be done in a secure way that meets the compliancy I need. So a lot of the trickle down effect of that is a lot of these smaller doctors groups and stuff like that are going to be tied to some hospital group, are going to have to interact with these things. They're like, what is the local, like you said, Methodist in Houston? If I'm a small doctor in Houston that sending patients to and from Methodist and whatever, I'm going to be like, oh, what is Methodist doing? And they're like, oh, they're a hard no on AI right now. Well, what am I? Unfortunately, that's probably the decision I'm going to make, because I have no other type of strategic guidance around it. And I don't really have a way to invest in it around it without some of the bigger medical players doing it. So it's kind of a weird market, I think, but a lot of it is more hindered by that security compliancy concept in the medical arena, I think, with the PII. But I do think, like I said, some of the billing workflows, things like figuring out which CPT codes you should use and all that, where you're not necessarily looking at sensitive medical data. A lot of research stuff could be done there. But again, that's not on the smaller doctor side. That's more in the larger, funded learning hospitals and stuff like that, research side.
Yeah, and it's funny, Brad, when you were saying that, I'm just, I came from the infrastructure background, so we're like the skeptics of the AI, right? Like all of the business analysts, and a Methodist, they had a large IT group. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many IT folks we had. I think we're at 26,000 employees total. And, everybody's kind of got all the good ideas. Obviously, security and compliance rules all, at least in my experience on the medical side. And they kind of drive it, to be honest, because why am I as a sysadmin gonna try to deploy something when it's just immediately gonna get shut down? So unfortunately for the larger hospitals, that's probably the decision makers there, or at least that's what I've seen. Like you said, the market's really weird with medical, because a lot of these smaller practices, they're like somehow, and I don't know all the details and semantics, but they're effectively affiliated through like a Houston Methodist or another larger hospital. And so they have to conform to whatever the heck they tell you to do. So and I know, Methodists, when I left there probably what was it, 2019-ish, 2020-ish, or maybe now it was about 22. They were starting to deploy out some, Alexas in all of the hospital rooms that were supposed to be recording kind of like what the doctors were taking notes on. And they were already getting pretty ahead of the game when it came to AI, at least from my perspective. And this has probably reminded me to reach out to the teams that were a part of that, because I'm curious to see like how quick that got shut down, because I thought it was a great idea. And I think people would be surprised. I was very shocked. I mean, hospitals, they take care of people, they do amazing work, but it's still a business. And the amount of technology in a large hospital like a hospital like Houston Methodist or Memorial Hermann or some of these larger hospital, like they track all kinds of stuff. Just like you said with Target, I can name about 10 or 12 use cases just like that. And so I think thinking outside of the box, note taking obviously for doctors, and being able to just go in and not have, I know that's a big deal. And I have some family members that I wouldn't say they're doctors, but they manage practices, and they say that's a big pain. The note taking, the documentation, that's maybe some low hanging fruit, in my opinion.
And doing some automations based on what's in the documentation to go ahead and be able to tag like certain CPT codes, diagnosis codes, things like that, because that's honestly what translates into the insurance companies to get paid, right, on the medical side. So some of that stuff I could see. I do think, again, not a small case, but an interesting case would be something like telemetry. Like I'm sure in the hospital you are at, and I've seen this in a lot of hospitals where they have like a wireless telemetry system, but they still have a room full of nurses or different people reading that telemetry and flagging that telemetry. And I think all telemetry is, you don't necessarily need to know the details of the patient. You just need to be able to see the heartbeat and know like the bed number or something, right? And so a lot of those little blips and things like that on telemetry, I think it'd be really interesting to maybe do some type of project that AI is looking at that and flagging certain patterns and stuff like that. Because a lot of those telemetry rooms get kind of busy and sometimes things get missed when the humans are watching it. It'd be nice that if there was like, it's something that I could see being done, but again, it's gonna have to go through FDA approval and all that other crap. So even if someone developed that today, you're 5 years out from it actually being able to be used in a real patient scenario or something like that because of FDA approvals. It's just, there's a lot of regulatory problems with healthcare in general, with IT technology, with everything. And it's, privacy needs to be taken into account. I totally agree with privacy, but it does seem like there needs to be some fast track for some of these things to be able to get through some of these regulatory hurdles easier.
Yeah, it's funny. The couple of things you guys mentioned are things that I've had impacted with the last month or so. So I went to the dentist and got like deep cleanings and laser treatments, and so a dental hygienist worked on me for like 2 or 3 sessions. And I remember they used AI, and so she's going through. There would normally be someone in the room with the dental hygienist taking notes as she's reading off like the status of each one of my tooths and the gums of each tooth and that stuff. And she's literally just, it's a number coded system like T6, 13 or something like. I don't remember exactly what she was saying, but like, and then when it was done, it summarized the status of my mouth. And so it was all, there are obviously use cases for that in the medical industry, like you said, from the note taking perspective, and the cost coding is huge. And so we've been in talks with, we've been working with a mental health care provider here in Houston, which we all know is well underfunded and well underutilized across the nation, and helping them streamline their cost coding and understanding why some like United Healthcare and Blue Cross Blue Shields will accept different cost codes, and like building that matrix out for them, and how, okay, so we know the last 25 times we submitted by this, they've denied it first time, and last 25 times and so helping them just do that and building out that matrix. But the fact that like even these smaller, and this is a company of 25 or so people, like even though they're thinking about that now, is like, because they can see the ROI of that. It's like, if you can get the first time approvals from the insurance companies to increase by 10%, it pays for itself 10 times over, taking the time to develop that solution. Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know you touch base on a lot of things. Robert and I, again, we work with the chemical industry, oil and gas industry. So a lot of stuff at the edge, right? People working in remote locations and things. We know that you have some experience in that too. So we've talked about like, utilizing LLMs and things like that, but I'd like to focus now on how, localized LLMs, whether they're running on a Raspberry Pi or, an edge device or just a Mac Studio in the middle of nowhere. Can you talk about some use cases that you've come across with your customers and clients from that perspective, and then how maybe building that specialized model that, you're just looking for something on an assembly line versus this giant models, how you've seen that revolutionize these mid-market companies?
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for smaller models because they are less energy intensive. They don't need as much to run, stuff like that. Like the large language models, they require massive data centers, but they also know things like ChatGPT knows the history of French history of 1600 and the Renaissance and all these other things and how to speak Portuguese and Mandarin and whatever. And it's like, I don't need any of that, right? So I have seen some scaled down things. I'd like to do more of it, honestly, but some scaled down things where there's more purpose built small things. Like think about in a manufacturing firm, you've got actually, you could do this in medical too, come to think of it, going back to medical, but I'll do the manufacturing kind of scenario, but then we can go back to talk about medical. But where you're looking just at like a large machine that they need to worry about temperature and throughput and all this stuff. And they're looking at all these different analytics coming out of that machine on the way it's performing. They're looking at maintenance logs. They're looking at manufacturer recommendations, stuff like that. And they're trying to like schedule downtime or repair time or make sure they're not pushing too much through this machine at a time, making sure that temperatures aren't getting too hot for certain things so that the machine doesn't melt, stuff of that nature. And having something locally that's monitoring all that and able to flag on some of that stuff on a very small level, I've seen success at. But going back to the medical thing, think like X-ray, MRI, some of those type, multi-million-dollar machines that are doing some of these things. Those machines require maintenance. Those machines require a lot of specialtive mechanical care. There's a lot of certified technicians that have to touch that machine just to keep it working, not necessarily when they're testing the patient, but what has to happen in between patients to clean it up? What happens, how often do they need to do certain cycles of maintenance? How is that going to affect patient scheduling for when patients could use the machine? If you're at a larger hospital group, like what y'all were talking about, like where they have 4 or 5 maybe MRI machines at the hospital because they need that many, how can they cycle the maintenance to be the most effective and stuff like that? I think you could do some small localized LLM models on some things like that. And that would be interesting. But I'll tell you where most people start at with that is like a project me and a friend are trying to do is we run a home assistant at our house for home automation. And this is kind of our first foray into LLMs is we put Proxmox on at our house with home assistant and one guest OS, and we're throwing an LLM and another OS. And instead of having Alexa or Google Home or something, now we're trying to do our own, talk to an LLM through voice and then let that LLM do things with home assistant, turn lights on and do all those cool things, right? And honestly, a small model like that, which still technically is an LLM, but a small model like that, I mean, you're right. You can host it on an old piece of hardware or on a smaller, less expensive piece of hardware than big, massive servers and big, massive data centers. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question all the way, but
Yeah. No, I think like where I tell people to get started is like what you said in your personal life. All of these tools can really help you. And it's worth noting, like, the benefit of doing what John just described is you don't have to worry about anybody capturing data. And I'm normally not the type of person that worries about my data being looked at or ChatGPT training on it. But like people don't realize there's a court case right now with ChatGPT. Like anything you send ChatGPT right now is fully not publicly available, but available to that court due to this lawsuit. And they're retaining everything. And I think it's crazy to think that they're ever going to delete this stuff. I mean, I'm just thinking in my head of executives and what I know about certain types of people and the potential gain they could have by capturing all of this and legally being allowed to keep it. Because I think they would argue it hinders them, but I would say it really helps them keep training and building what they're building now. And that you can't even put a dollar amount to that. To me, that's worth every penny, the time it takes to build something like that. So you don't even have to worry about it ever coming back to haunt you. And I always took the approach of, hey guys, like I'm not a bad person, so I got nothing to worry about. But then again, people are using these tools for, emotional support. They're using these tools for like all kinds of things nobody ever thought they would be using them for. And I wouldn't use any ChatGPT tool for that right now, but I know tons of people that do. And it's wild.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think it gets you into the public model versus private model. A lot of people come talking about ChatGPT hallucinations and this and that. And yes, you can fix all of that with proper prompting, but a lot of that is just knowledge of ChatGPT. If you think about how ChatGPT is trained, I mean, it's going out and scraping Reddit. It's going out and scraping things like that. Like honestly, if you read through some subreddits, do you really agree with most of the opinions in that subreddit? That's kind of what it's using to learn. And so my argument, like that court case that in was it New York, with those attorneys that submitted ChatGPT for research and submitted some course, some documents saying that these cases, whatever, blah blah blah. The truth is, they didn't check that, which was a big problem. They should have checked when they submitted that. People are like, "Oh, ChatGPT hallucinated." The truth is that probably exists out there. Maybe it wasn't actually tied to a court. Maybe it was tied to like a student's project that's becoming a lawyer, or a fake case that was argued for some other reason like that, or part of, some hypothetical things for teaching law students. Like you
Mhm.
don't know where that really came from, but the truth is ChatGPT didn't necessarily really make that up. It's pulled that from somewhere, from where it learned, and it learned those specifics of that case, whether that case was fake or not, or which court it was submitted to or not, or what type of precedents it had or not. The truth is it was out there, but because ChatGPT just scrapes the internet, like that's how it came up with that. I guarantee you, if you did enough research and kind of went back through that, you probably could find exactly what I'm talking about. It's out there somewhere,
Mhm.
just as a case study or as something else, maybe not as a real court case, right? And so, how do you get around that? Well, if you can privatize your model and put all your data into your model, and you only train it on your data and only train it on the opinions that you agree with, or only train it on the things you want it trained on, you have a lot more control over that. It's like the difference is you have a baby and you can teach that baby everything in the world that you want to know and keep it protected from things you don't want to know, or things like that. Where now it's like ChatGPT is like, I have an intern, and that intern had a real rough time during early college. And that intern also did some things during high school that you probably don't want your baby to do. And now I'm asking it these questions, and I'm getting things out of that college intern that has, let's face it, some checkered history in some areas. Right. And so
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
yeah, that goes into that whole, do I self host or do I do private LLMs versus public LLMs? And self host, running smaller LLMs at your home is one thing, but there are a lot of larger companies like BDO and Starbucks and some of these people that are using Azure or something like that, Snowflake, one of those, to build up a full level LLM that is their internal LLM, and they're training it just off of their data or just off the documentation and the SOPs and stuff of the way they want things done, not opinions of Reddit and just the open internet. And I think, some of those larger companies that are doing that, I think they're going to get a lot better results out of the questions that they ask their own LLM, that they've spent the time training it properly, basically, giving it the proper knowledge.
Yeah, and the privacy is a big thing. So I have a funny story to say. So it's the holiday season, right? And so I was at my fiance's house researching gifts for my fiance, and just on my laptop and or my phone, it may have been both of them. And I was searching like designer handbags. I know she likes this one brand of designer handbag, and she doesn't look up designer hand. She knows how designer handbags I know she likes, but like she was looking at shoes and dresses and stuff on it, and she's like, she got an Instagram ad for a designer handbag. She's like, "Are you gonna get me a designer handbag for Christmas?" Because I just got an ad on Instagram for one, like literally. And you have to think that the AI models are doing this at an even bigger scale.
Yeah.
And so like I was like, holy crap, like that was just like the aha. And I have like script blocker, ad blocker, all that kind of stuff in my I have privacy badger, the on my browser and all this other stuff, and it still captured that, at the probably at the the at the router level type stuff. So just know that these LLMs are going to have that. And so I do agree that these catered models are the future. It's going to get easier and easier and easier for you to run models local on your devices. Our cell phones are getting faster. Our laptops are getting faster, the low end ones. Robert and I use an app called Whisperflow. We have Max, and like it records our meetings for us, because we can record with Copilot on Teams, but if we join a team that's on a call on Zoom and it's not being recorded, I want to have that recording, that transcript. And so we use Whisperflow, and it's just a local voice model that runs on our Macs and it does the transcripts for us and all these other kinds of things.
And Whisper, you can also do like text into like Word docs and other things like that.
Yep.
Like instead of having to sit and type out a bunch of things, you could just dictate to your computer and stuff too, which is, I think, a big time change or saver, because I don't necessarily type fast. Even though I work on computers all the time, I hate having to type report after report after report, my hands start hurting at a certain point, and I can just say to the computer so much quicker and then make the small edits.
Yep. And then also, basically utilizing those localized models, what we tell people too, we're real big fans of Notebook LM, notebooklm.google.com. And so if you're doing research for a paper or something like that, go to notebooklm.google.com, upload the PDFs or the research papers or the white papers or anything, any kind of data that you want to just live in this little black box, and you can chat with that data basically, and it becomes your little privatized LM. And it even turns it into a podcast for you if you want it to. It'll turn into a podcast with like multiple speakers, and it's very, very uncanny valley and weird. But like that's just, if you want to get a taste of what the power of a localized model, that's a good place to start as Notebook LM. We certainly are big fans of that. We see that as the hardware gets better, as the models get better, it's going to get easier and easier for folks to just have that to utilize those solutions. So I guess kind of building off of that, like minimal viable, LLMs or, these localized models, what can we talk about like minimum viable like automations? And so how maybe you could talk about like how you go to onboard a client and then figure out like what problems they need to solve and how you can, start small and think big, start with those low hanging fruit and kind of build into these bigger solutions.
Yeah. So yeah, I follow I do have somewhat of a programming background and stuff, talk about doing websites, but I did go to college. My bachelor's degree is in interactive media and web development, right? So, and this was in 2008, somewhere in there when I graduated. I don't even remember I graduated college. This is bad. Okay, somewhere in there when I graduated. And so I do have some of that development background, but the whole idea of like a minimum viable product or what minimum can you do? A lot of AI projects fail because they have this big grandiose idea and they want to do all these things. And let's face it, most of these mid-market companies don't even have the money to do all that at one time, let alone the organization, let alone the thought process and the planning and all that stuff to try and do something. I highly recommend finding small little things. So, example that we've done, one of our first clients that we really did this with was a manufacturing firm that manufactures refrigerator gasketry. And they basically have these different machines that their techs are running in the manufacturing floor and stuff to do things. And they're going through and manufacture what they need to manufacture. And it's running some legacy software and some legacy systems because upgrading these things is more than just, upgrading the software is more than just a software upgrade. It means changing out hardware. It means a lot of things, right? Kind of like in medical, you find MRI machines still running Windows 98 and stuff like that because no one's replacing a $5 million MRI machine just because Windows is out of date, Anyways, that's a whole different story. But with this firm, we're just asking like supporting them in different things, and we're just asking like, what are you doing every day? Like, what are some things? What makes you mad or whatever? The owner's like, at the end of the day, I do this process where I take all this data out of our manufacturing system and I get it into UPS World Ship to make sure the products get shipped out right. And I got to put it into our billing system so that gets billed. So basically, if this process doesn't happen, nothing gets billed, nothing gets shipped, right? Which is a big problem for a manufacturing firm. And we looked at it at the end of the day, basically either her, the owner, or like her floor manager or her supervisor, basically her top 3 paid employees are doing this for on average an hour and a half a day. And we sat down with her, kind of saw what they were doing, built an RPA flow, a classic RPA flow, didn't even include any type of LLM or really truly AI stuff, just built a robotic process automation flow that took the data, reformatted the data, put it into the different systems, and that was it. She's a little bit older and she doesn't, outside of IT and technical. And so she's like, I want a button that I can press at the end of the day to make it happen. Okay. So we gave her a link and stuff like that to run this process for her. And it got to the point like within a month where she was forgetting to press the button. And so they were like, how we suggested we just have it run at midnight every night. Do you want to do that now? And so now it just runs at midnight every night. But the point is this is a little small project, cost them like $5,000 to do. And it's saving them an hour to an hour and a half a day. So if you want to think about that, 30 to 45 hours a month of time. Obviously, you get a quick ROI on that. Then you go to the next project. What's the next thing that's causing you problems? So the next thing that's causing you problems. And then you do these little 1% changes where, some other firms would have gone in there and been like, well, we can revolutionize your whole manufacturing floor. We can put in all these systems and all these blah, 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 and it's, we have to build all this out and stuff. And it's like, that's the wrong way to do it for most small businesses or most medium businesses. The right way is to find the little things and let's just focus on the little things and make little changes that everybody can live with, where there's not a lot of outlay. You're not spending a lot of money because let's face it, a lot of these companies don't have tons of money to blow and they need success, right? And so you do a big project that costs you $300,000 and it doesn't go well. Most of these companies can afford that. Where a project that costs $5,000 to a firm like that isn't as big of a pill to swallow. And then because of the metrics, I mean, she had less than a 2-month ROI on that. Of course, she's like, okay, what is next? This is awesome, right? And so I think some of the holdups to some of the AI problems is people think too big. And I think it's great to have a goal and an end in mind of where you want to be. But I think how you get there is those little steps. The whole saying of eating the elephant one bite at a time, something of that nature, one of those philosophy sayings, that's really what it is. If you can just automate and do little things one step at a time, if you take a 12-step process from a business that they're doing or 15-step process that they're doing in their business, and you go, okay, these 2 or 3 areas here, we could easily put in an LLM prompt that does X, Y, and Z for you and makes that faster or whatever. Or we can easily automate this through some different ways, or we could even get into some agentic flow. And now, instead of a 15-step or 12-step process, it's a 4-step process for the human. What benefit did that give back? You didn't try and replace the entire process in one fell swoop. And it may be possible for you to replace the entire process, but let's do a small investment and take care of these 2 steps. And now let's do another small investment and take care of these 2 or 3 other steps and grow like that and find the pain points and really focus on that, I think is a much better way to go about it than just trying to I see these business owners and leaders go to this conference, these conferences, or a lot of times industry specific conferences, whatever. And they're like, oh, so-and-so is doing this. Well, so-and-so is also 100 times your size. They're an international player and you're not, right? If they spend $1 million on a project and it fails, it doesn't even hardly affect their bottom line because of how big they are. If you, Mr. $25 million, a year client, you spend $1 million on a project and it fails, what happens to you? Yeah, we don't even have $1 million to spend, right? That's kind of where you're at. And so for the mid-market to kind of get in, they've really got to think about that give and take, and that let's have a very good end in mind or goal, but let's make that a 2-year goal. And let's focus on these little short-term wins and just compound those short-term wins over time, and you'll get there.
Yeah, it's funny. I say this to clients, we turn people down all the time because they have that mindset. They'll have somebody in their organization that is like the Elon Musk, the guy that he's thinking big picture. He wants to do all this stuff. But then the small little things that you're talking about, the boots on the ground people, the people that are actually going to make the change happen at the end of the day, they can barely keep their head above water. And, we'll go do a discovery and it's like, guys, they want to do a huge deployment of software, ERP or whatever. And it's like, wait, hey, hold up. We need to take 10 steps back and fix all of this first. And it's very surprising to me how few companies see that bigger picture there and understand that. We've definitely butted heads in the past with folks, and so much so we're just like, look, we just don't think this is going to work, because our philosophy, and it sounds like you're probably a lot of the same, is, look, one big deployment, one big project isn't change to me. It's a continuous thing. It's a monthly, weekly, daily, let's keep improving over and over and over again. Not just, hey, let's go deploy, a $200,000 piece of software and wipe our hands clean and see ya. No, I want to build something together with you. And I want to empower the people. That's what I love to do. I know that's what Brad loves to do as well, is showing the end user, showing that user you were talking about what's possible. Because in my experience, they have tons of other use cases once they even know what you can even do. And then if you can show them how to do it, that's even better. Then they can start building things on their own. That is the future that a lot of people don't see yet. That is what's going to be happening. The people that are able to take use of these tools and use them, even though they're not an IT person, even though they're not a business analyst, the people that can use these tools, like those folks, like the business analyst, like a developer would, like an IT person would, those are the people that are really they're going to make a lot of change over the next 5 to 10 plus years for sure.
They sure can. But I see the other side of that too. I see locally here, there's just some CEO groups and stuff, and I've worked with them, and they're bringing in people to help train the CEO on AI, excuse me. And at a certain point, I look at some of these CEOs that are struggling, and they're trying to get into N8N and doing some of these different things. And it's like, here's kind of a delineation line. You, Mr. CEO, I want you to know it enough that you understand it. Kind of like, I know how to mow my lawn and I've mowed lawns before, but I don't mow my own lawn. Now, if you want to mow your own lawn because you like it and it's fun and you enjoy Florida heat and
Says no one ever.
in August, and that's what you want to do because you're able to clear your mind. It's meditative while you're mowing the lawn, whatever, great. You need to be able to look at that lawn and know, are my lawn guys doing good or not doing good? Right. And I think once you've met that criteria, sometimes if you're not that personality, or if you've got a lot of other things that you're trying to work on, maybe it is better to bring in a partner, or maybe it is better to find somebody to work, either whether they're internal or external, to work with you or work under you to develop some of that stuff. But I do think some leadership gets in a trap where they're trying to figure it out all on their own, and they're way past the point of where they really should be. They've figured out enough to be able to see a vision and cast a vision. And that's really what you need. And then be able to look at that vision and see people executing on it. And are they executing on it the way that you want? Right. And so that's very important. You have to be able to visualize that and be able to see the end in mind. But some of these guys, I see them, they're, we're now in the third or fourth session of this CEO group that's brought in different people to train on AI, and they've tried doing different scenarios and stuff, and they see things that they could do for their company, but they're like, man, it's going to take me hours to do it, or I'm going to fumble through this. Or somebody who's more experienced at these 4 or 5 different systems that need to talk together and has done things like JSON calls before and stuff like that could do this way quicker and easier than I ever could. And so if you want to do it, if you get to that point and you want to do it because you find it fun and you like it and you want to be up at 3:00 in the morning banging through some of this stuff, great, be that. But I think a lot of these senior leaders can go too far. I think they need to get like, okay, I see a vision, see some ways of how it could be done. I've got some base level understanding. I'm literate with AI. I understand AI. I realize I'm not going to be the AI expert. Not everybody can be an AI expert, just like not everybody is an artist. I can paint a little bit. I can doodle. I understand how to draw a little bit, but I'm not Michelangelo. I'm not Leonardo da Vinci, anything like that, right? But some people are. And if that's you, that's great. But if that's not, and you want somebody to paint a mural on your wall, you're going to give them the idea of what you want painted and get them to paint it. And so I think there's a fine line there where some executive teams dig in too much on their own and are like buying into, I've bought Claude, and I just met with somebody the other day. They're paying $100, $200 Anthropic fee for something, and they've got ChatGPT and they've got Gemini, and they're in the Microsoft like ecosystem, but they're trying to use Gemini. And it's like, I understand you like some things about Gemini better, but what if you just built this in Copilot since you're already in Microsoft and all your data already lives in Microsoft? If you really like Gemini that bad or like Gemini that much, and you're not that big of a fan of Microsoft, why don't you move to G Suite for everything else too? Because you're kind of hitting walls there of like G Suite, the Google for Work and Gemini are made to work very well together. And, it's one throat to choke, and they're building the integrations. And let's face it, Google's going to build Gemini to work with G Suite the best, right? And, like that's cool, do that. But you got to pick some lanes. You got to understand where you're going. You got to have that vision. And then let some people work for you versus trying to do it all yourself. And I think that's, I don't know, I've just seen that problem a lot. I've tried to consult with people a lot where they're like, I have this idea I want to talk to you about. Okay, great. All right, I went out and I signed up for Airtables, and I went out and I did this, and I went out and did that. It's like, well, why? Well, I found some YouTube videos and da-da-da. I was like, okay, but why wouldn't you just do it this way? And like, I don't know. I didn't know that was an option. Like, okay, slow down there. You have a vision. Do you want to be the one doing this? And a lot of times they're like, well, no, not really. I'm actually need to do these 5 or 6 other things over here. Okay, then let's talk. You go do this 5 or 6 other things, and then we'll handle this, right? Yeah. It's just, I don't want to be a dead horse, but it's just, I see it over and over and over again.
Yeah, we do as well. And I think the biggest problem I can tell, the biggest thing for business leaders that I can say is like, don't make these decisions in a silo. Don't make them in your black box. Talk to the boots on the ground. They're the people doing the work. That's why we have discovery sessions. We don't we even tell the executives we talk to is like, hey, great, you have your vision, but I need to talk to the people who can tell me whether that vision is actually a reality or even possible. You can still, you're so far removed, even in these small mid-market companies that are 50 employees, they're still so far removed from what's happening day in day. They just get their weekly status update or something like that, and so they think things are going smoother. But like, no, Jane in accounting is doing 27 jobs, and she's eventually going to burn out. And if you lose her, you're screwed as a company. So that's my biggest thing is yes, learn more about these tools and get a better understanding of that, but know more about your business more than you need to know about the tools. We tell people all the time, we're business analysts far more when we're technologists this day and age, because for these tools to work, we have to know the context. And so building upon that, you guys have kind of touched on this already a little bit, but, aligning tech with the business goals, and like, John, could you just talk about how you guide your clients to be like operators and not just technologists, and think of things from like the problem solving perspective, not so much focusing on the tool?
Yeah, I think that's very big. That goes back to that casting that vision and going back to kind of mine and auditing, like, okay, what is it you're actually trying to do? What are your processes like? And then what infrastructure do you already have? There already are some key things like that last example of, oh, well, we're very centric on Microsoft. We use Microsoft Excel, but we're trying to use Gemini for these things because we like Gemini and we read Gemini is better and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you're fighting a war there. You're not going to win because Microsoft's going to invest in Microsoft stuff and Google's going to invest in Google stuff. And I don't see them investing in each other. Do you? So other than Apple with what they're doing with Siri and choosing to take on Gemini with Siri, which I applaud them for. But other than that, these larger companies are competing and they're trying to stay in their lane and trying to get as many people into their ecosystem as possible. And so picking a lane and staying in that lane and not changing every time there's a new shiny object or a new feature is probably important. Just because what you've picked may not be able to do it now, it doesn't mean in 6 months they won't be able to do it. Like, let's face it, you started with ChatGPT 3.5, you went through, now we're on the 5.0 model. Gemini just came out with Gemini 3. Every 6 months, you're seeing an evolution. And what they're weak on, whatever that product is weak on, compared to the other competitors, they're going to try and focus on for their next evolution. It's always a moving target, and really comes down to what things you've already invested in, where your data lives, what your security policies are around that data. What does your infrastructure look like? Again, a cloud-based LLM sucks if you don't have internet, right?
Yeah,
So
no kidding.
going back to that basic operational IT of like, are things even working? Are you stable with what you have? And then is it secure and compliant? And then going back to our technology maturity model of that integration layer, like, how is this cross-functional between departments and between humans? How is that tied into your SOPs? What processes are you actually doing? What steps in those processes really move the needle and which ones really don't? And understanding like KPIs and stuff like that, then be able to go in and do, the AI functions. Like, I like partnering a lot with like EOS people and stuff. I'm not sure if y'all familiar with EOS and Traction, but you also have System and Soul and some things like that. I love those guys because they're sitting in these leadership meetings. Big things they're focusing on are things like scorecards and KPIs. Well, if you understand what your business looks like successful on like your utilization or like, your sales flow or logistics time and, things like that you're tracking as a scorecard to be leading indicators for your business, that's great to be able to come in and be like, okay, if this really moves your business forward, we could automate this, and this, and we could 10x that number, right? But if businesses don't actually know those numbers and haven't actually thought through their processes and flows and how they score those, and if they're on target or not on target, or what that does to the entire ecosystem of their business, it's very hard to do an AI project or an automation project. But it's basically going back to what you're saying. You got to focus on the business, got to understand how your business operates. You got to understand that side of it before you pick a tool.
Yep. And I think you got to be able to, you got to somewhat build it in a way where you can move tools if necessary, right? Like, I think where the data lives is very critical, and being able to pivot when necessary. Because like you said, it seems like every week something new's coming out, and the market's moving so fast. You don't want to get too far into something like being all in on ChatGPT, model 4 and have all these custom instructions and got it working just how you like it. Then all of a sudden they get rid of that, because they have gotten rid of them. Even on the Azure, private models, they've gotten rid of that stuff. And so you got to, obviously that's way further down the line, but you got to think through that as well. But it's interesting problems, and it's fascinating, and it's very fun to solve them and think about them. And I think we've had a really, really good discussion now. I think we're going to move over to this rapid fire round where Brad and I just kind of ask some questions to you, and we may respond in, what is it, 30 seconds or less, or a minute or less, Brad, for these?
Yeah, pretty quick. We could, otherwise
Yeah.
we could keep talking all day, I think. So
Yeah, we'll talk all day. But no, we have a few questions. One of the ones that I really liked is what's one of the AI, like what's an AI tool that every mid-market organization should try exploring today?
I think Explore with guidance, it's not used as much, and it's got a bad rap because the way that Microsoft has pushed it. But I think Copilot, the paid version, where it's actually integrated and with a little bit of knowledge, is important. Copilot is a little bit more complex because it follows Microsoft security and ecosystem and stuff. So like when you go to deploy a Copilot bot within Microsoft, if you've never deployed an enterprise app within a Microsoft environment, it's not going to go well because it starts following those enterprise app rules and stuff like that. I think once you understand that and you control it like a user and like an app within the Microsoft ecosystem, it can unlock a lot of things. But I think Microsoft has done a bad job at the way they market it, the way they talk about it. They gave a free version that doesn't do crap, and people try the free version is like a Copilot sucks. And yes, the free version of Copilot sucks. But I say that because 70% of the market, 75% of the market is already invested and on Microsoft 365 using SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams and things like that. And if you're doing that, Copilot's very integrated with those systems already. And I think you can unlock a lot of cool little use cases and features, not even doing custom bots with Copilot Studio and stuff like that, just by turning some of that on and going through some of the basic playing with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
We preach the Copilot as well. Again, your data's already there. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel. It's not the greatest tool out there, but it's the one where all your data lives, and we can help get it to where it needs to be for that. And I think John and us, Digital Meld, will tell you right now, there's Copilot assessments that we can work with Microsoft to get you assessment through. That's a free service. Contact either one of us, and I think we can help you do that. And there's a lot of Microsoft is basically giving Copilot away to at least try. If you take the time to help build out that right deployment, they'll give you 5 or 10 licenses at a severely discounted rate because they want you to buy in. And we think we live and die by. We both have paid licenses, as does our team, and like just the meeting capture alone is worth its weight in gold.
And the facilitator within Teams, and
the facilitator is fantastic.
Great things that are coming out.
Yep. So I think we could be our last rapid fire just because we are approaching an hour here, and we just don't want to keep yapping. So what's an AI misconception that frustrates you the most from that perspective?
I think going back to understanding the knowledge and the data and the training, and when you should do things in a private LLM or something that you can control the training or control the knowledge a lot more versus public knowledge. I do think that there's a time to ask ChatGPT, and especially on the personal side of things. Like I use Gemini a lot personally because I have a personal G Suite account and stuff like that. And I love it for that type of stuff. Asking about recipes, asking about cool things out on the internet, things like that. Right. But when it comes to like making actual data decisions on, say, medical diagnosis or on financial things and stuff like that, or on certain things like that, yes, the public LLMs can get you some answers, but sometimes those answers are mixed because it's looking at mixed information that is studied off the internet. If you privatize that and you put in what you know to be factual or what you know to be right, and then ask that private LLM those questions, or even with some things with RAG or building your own Gem and Gemini or project, or whatever system you're using, a lot of these have a way to do that. But the more you can control the data, the more accurate things are going to be. And too many people take the public models like ChatGPT as like God's word. And there's no actual single point of truth. There's no actual truth in what it's found. It's just trying to predict based on everything that it knows. And let's face it, a lot of the crap that it's been trained on is crap. And that's why you get garbage in, garbage out. That's why you get some of the answers and hallucinations are just wrong information from some of those systems like that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, great insights. And again, we echo pretty much everything you said. I think Robert and I agree with wholly and completely. And it's funny because it's how we handle things too, how you bring a customer on and try to solve their problems and stuff. So thank you again for this conversation. Again, I think Robert and I could talk to you all day because there are so many synergies there, but we know you're a busy person. We've got some customer calls to get to as well. So for the last couple of minutes, I just want to open the floor to you for a minute or two. Just let people know where they can find you, how they can get a hold of you, what's the best way. We'll pop up the information on the screen. It'll be included in the show notes at Digital Meld. It'll be included in the show notes and the newsletter that comes out on LinkedIn. If you go to linktree.com/Digital Meld, you can get access to all of that information. We'll have the links to everything John's talked about and all the resources and stuff as well. So thank you again, John, for coming on. We just want to open the floor to you now.
Yeah,
Go for it.
thank you. Thanks for having me. Had a lot of fun. But yeah, if you want to connect with me, LinkedIn's great. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't post as much. I'm more of a silent LinkedIner and read a lot of things, but I always like meeting people on LinkedIn. You can also check us out at sentrytechsolutions.com. And those are the two main ways. Once you get to sentrytechsolutions.com or my LinkedIn, you can usually get to me if you need to.
Yeah, and I imagine much like us, you'll have an open consultation with anyone, right? So if they reach out to you on LinkedIn or the website, you'll have a 30-minute conversation with them and just say, hey, what are the possibilities, right? So I encourage everybody out there to reach out to John and his team, much like hopefully you can reach out to us too. But at the same time, we say it's going to take a village, and we know that there's plenty of work out there for all of us. Florida is a great market. Texas is a great market. I think we're going to be just fine. Robert, do you have anything else you want to say before we go?
No, John, really appreciated the talk. Like Brad said, I think you and I probably see things somewhat eye to eye, especially around infrastructure and just IT systems. So I'm sure we could do this all day, but I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time, and really enjoyed the chat. Yeah,
absolutely. Definitely some potential partnerships, I think, in the future. If one of us needs to scale up really quickly and we need someone we can work with, I think we could definitely trust you, and vice versa.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Awesome. So thank you again, listeners, for joining us. Please visit linktree.com/Digital Meld. Please like and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps us. Share it on LinkedIn. Reach out to us. Obviously, all of our contact information will be in the show notes and the newsletter. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, linktree.com/Digital Meld. It's the top link on there. Really, it's a great resource. And so all the information we talked about in here is a single pane of glass when it comes to your inbox every week. And I think we're up to 400 subscribers on there, which is nice. And thank you again. We look forward to the next conversation we have. John, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
See you.
We want to hear about your AI and automation journey, and we'd love for you to get involved with Start Small, Think Big. If you'd like to participate or offer feedback, please reach out to us anytime via email at contact@digitalmeld.io or use the contact form on our website, digitalmeld.io/contact. Also, please help spread the word by liking, subscribing, and sharing our podcasts on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks.